Heart and Hand is delighted to be partnering up once again with NordVPN, the premier VPN service available. You can safely search out what you like anywhere in the world with NordVPN and make sure that your privacy is protected. Go to nordvpn.com for the full range of offers. Hello everyone and welcome back, and I do mean back, to a very special podcast. Those of you who've been listening for a long time will know that a few seasons ago, coincidentally or not, our most successful one in recent years, we had a monthly show where I would get together a couple of my close friends representing the visual, the written and the audio wings of Rangers fan media. So joining me today, delighted to say, is first of all from Four Lads Had a Dream, it's and the Rangers Review, of course, it's Stevie Clifford and Heart and Hand. You're a renaissance man, Stevie.
Yeah, I'm just a hooer for whoever will take it. You know that. So, I'm absolutely delighted to be back, lads. It's been too long.
And he's actually got something to push today, something so that even he'll want to push. So at the end of the show, we'll be able to get him to do that. And of course, to bring the average age of the pod down and certainly the average hair of the pod right up is, of course, the wonderful CJ Novo. Good afternoon, CJ. How goes it, my man?
Afternoon. It's been a while, gentlemen. How's things?
Far too long. And listen, I just want to... Right, some people use the word heroes. And I wouldn't use it, but if others want to, yesterday afternoon, early afternoon, we said, well, Stevie, to be fair, said we should do the show. I will do the show, and we won. Now, some people will say it had nothing to do with it. Those people are liars, and those people should shut, right? Because it's not the case. But bloody hell, CJ, did we make life difficult yesterday afternoon as we took on Hearts?
Oh, I didn't have, mate. It's never easy. It's never simple. You go into a Sunday game. There's been drop points elsewhere. You're feeling good about yourself, and then Rangers just like to make you put through the ringer. But the last 9 minutes was great, mate. I loved it. Yeah. I don't know about the rest of it, but the last 9 minutes were great.
Yeah, the first 90, which is usually a drawback in football if the first 90 is poor. But you cannot beat the feeling of a last-minute winner. And listen, before we get stuck into it, I'm just going to say, if you're the type of person who says that, oh, we won, so you should be totally upbeat, that's probably not going to be the case today because there were a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. Equally, if you're the type of person who says you shouldn't be happy at all because we were so bad, it's not going to be the case either, because if you can't enjoy 2 injury time goals to win a match, then football, that's what it's about for me. It's those moments that in the gantry when Stevie hurtled along about 6 feet in a nanosecond to grab me and we're throwing each other up in the air. That's what football's about. Stevie, we spoke going to the game yesterday. Stevie and I go to the games together, and we spoke going up yesterday that for us the test was, it feels like, and I'm sure there maybe isn't, but it does feel like every single time Celtic have given us a glimmer, and it's only a glimmer, right? Because they have a big lead, even still, unfortunately. It's more than a game. That's a big lead as far as I'm concerned. But we have failed. And it's almost like the pressure, the added pressure, the added expectation being put on the squad seems to corrode what they do. And I have to admit, for 90 minutes yesterday, I thought this is going to happen again, because it was a performance of a team who had played a European game on Thursday. Absolutely it was. But when you have a fixture after Europe, and you have to learn how to cope with it, and they've been around the block long enough to know, you can't ask for any more than a home fixture. It's not an early kickoff, and against a team who have been struggling. Let's not kid ourselves. If you take away the fact that it's Hearts, third biggest team in Scotland, they're not a good side so far this season. And I thought Rangers, to be quite honest, in the first half in particular, were wretched.
Yeah, it wasn't a good performance. It wasn't a good individual or collective team performance. And I've got to be honest with you, David, I won't lie to either of you. I had already written out obituary, so to speak, in the blog for the report. I think it started with failures. They always let us down, and that's the way I felt. And I've never been so happy to select all and delete the paragraph or so that I'd already written. And I, like you yesterday, David, and it was interesting because when you watch the highlights, it's something I really enjoyed when watching the highlights back, but I didn't really celebrate the penalty equaliser. In my mind, it was still not enough, but you could actually hear the stadium, and it's really good. If you haven't seen this, go and watch the penalty replay. You can actually hear the stadium in unison kind of roar, "Come on." And it was a small cheer for the goal, and then everybody just got behind them, and there was a
separate cheer
change.
at kickoff. There was a separate cheer. You're right.
Yeah, there was a massive change in atmosphere, and well done to everyone that stuck around because they literally roared that team on. And as soon as they equalised, then the 9 minutes went up. The crowd just got behind them, and there was a definite change which we needed. And it wasn't perfect yesterday, far from it. We'll get into it, but as CJ said at the start of the show, you know, that last 9 minutes was a joy. And yes, folks, I did hurtle down the gantry to get to David in a mixture of relief and thank goodness, because the amount of times we've driven home from defeats and hardly spoke to each other and had that feeling of utter dejection. You know, I had it all in my head. Here we are, go again. The podcast tomorrow is going to be negative. It's going to be, you know, blah, blah, blah. But that was enjoyable. So well done, everybody. I think the crowd made a massive difference.
CJ, a phrase that people used to me last night, and it is appropriate, I do understand it, is, well, it was great, but we're papering over the cracks. And I think that it's actually quite a telling phrase, because when you paper over cracks, it's because the foundation of the house isn't good, isn't strong.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that's the case. I think that's really all the manager can do at the moment, because we know that the squad building in the summer was not good. I agree we needed to upgrade certain players. Cholak, for one, was one I felt we needed better than, but we haven't got better than what we had, and that's been the problem. So there's actually been quite a big regression, and had we lost yesterday, that would have been our third home defeat in 6 matches, which tells you something. So I actually agree that it's papering over the cracks, but not in a negative way, because I think that the manager has come in, he's clearly not impressed with the fitness of the squad, and he clearly believes, yes, and he clearly believes that the fitness is causing injury. That's why we're getting so many injuries. But you can't change that. You can't do a pre-season when you're playing every 3 days. So I think he's having to manage with what he has.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on, and it's something you have to look at as what he's doing with what's gone wrong. You say the foundations and that are falling apart to get the wins that he's got, and even the draw, which I thought was very good. Like, it wasn't a great game, but it was a great result almost, the way it's kind of gone there. I think that's all you can ask for him when he's coming in. Where we were, like you said, if we had lost that game for consecutive, a lot of the new signings that we've actually brought in has contributed more boos than goals and assists. You know what I mean? It's been frustrating to see how it's been gone. So I think it's no. I think people need to actually give a wee bit more credit to Phil that he's able to twist and turn. Like midweek in the European game, we had no left back, so you had to change formation. So I think it's something to look at and say, right, I maybe papering over the cracks, but that's showing his managerial abilities, in my opinion. So it's definitely something you can look at. But I think we need a lot of the new signings to actually start stepping up, as there's only maybe 2, you'd argue, out of the 9 that we signed that's performing, Seaman, Butland. The rest, long way to go to show their upgrades and what was here previously.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because, you know, would Cholak and Sakala have done better than,
I think the numbers suggest
some of the
that,
than Dessers and Lammers? Yes, they would. You know, would Lowry or Hadji contribute more than Lammers had? Probably. Now, that's not to say they'd contribute enough. You know,
well, that's the difference, absolutely. Yeah,
that's the thing, but they would contribute more. Stevie, again, we were chatting before the game about, and we have to talk about it, Seaman Dessers, and it's become almost one word. Seaman and Dessers, sorry, not Seaman, Lammers and Dessers. It's become almost one word, but because they've been put together, and there's a reason for that. Some players make slow starts. That can happen. As CJ said, unfortunately, most of them have. But they can show you something in the time that they are here. For instance, Dowell has moments, has bits, not anything to convince anyone he's the answer or anything, but you can point to this or that and this bit in a game, and there's nothing. And we're in virtually November now, and with both Lammers and Dessers, there hasn't been anything, and the manager is playing them. And I understand why, because you kind of have to try and get something out of them, especially given the paucity of the squad. It's not like it's chock full of options. And people were critical of him picking them yesterday. I wasn't, because they did okay against Hibs. And he probably thought, right, okay, let's continue that. But again, really poor performances, very, very desperately poor performances. The one thing I do disagree with the manager on is that Lammers staying on as long as he did perplex me, because I really don't get it. But he mentioned afterwards that Cantwell only had 60, 70 minutes in the leg, so he had to be aware of that. But I'm struggling to put any case together for the two of them, because right now they just look like awful signings that we're going to have to take a loss on.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot there, is there? And people will say they weren't the only ones that performed badly yesterday. And I had a lot of people say to me last night, you've highlighted these guys, but you didn't say anything about Tav, who had a terrible 90 minutes. Tavernier did have an awful performance yesterday, but then he scores the penalty, which took a lot of balls to do. And then he gets up and he puts in a brilliant assist for the second goal. So the reason James Tavernier, who equally was as poor, doesn't get criticism is because he has the balls to get big moments. Unfortunately for Dessers and Lammers, they don't look anywhere near like they're going to produce not only big moments, but little moments, David, because, you look at Lammers in particular, at least with Dessers, you can see he's trying and you can see he's putting himself about. Unfortunately, it's not working for him, but at least you can at least say to yourself, right, he's doing that. I don't see it with Lammers in the slightest. I think he looks half-hearted. Everything's a half jog. He dips his toe in, which is a trait that I can't stand. And people ask, what do you mean? I mean that like he goes into a 50-50 and it's a 20-80 in favour of the other person because he's going half-hearted. And it sounds critical, but I'm just not seeing anything. And this is from a guy that I really thought he almost hoodwinked all of us in pre-season because he looked like he was going to be the real deal. And we look now at the end of October, fastly coming into November, and he looks like he's got nothing to him at all. And he's not the only ones. These guys aren't the only ones, right? But here's the difference. There's Danilo, who's not set the world on fire yet, but looks like he's got something about him. And we can all say, hold on, no, he's not done great yet, but in the limited kind of glimpses we've shown, this boy can finish, at least. And he can hold it up, he can link in, he looks like a number 9, and there's a potential there to get better, like Kieran Dowell. I don't think Kieran Dowell is going to be wonderful in any shape or form. He's going to be our number 8 for years to come, but he's looked all right. So the issue with him is not his performances, but can we keep him fit? Butland's been a good signing. Seamer's really come on. He can find the net. So, he has moments like yesterday, maybe falls over the ball and stuff. But, so there's a handful of guys from the summer that you're saying, well, at least these guys can play. Balogun was always going to be a backup, and he'll do fine in the games that he'll play. Cifuentes, is there something to work with there? Possibly. He's not been fantastic, but there might be something there. But I'm sorry, David, these two guys, and this was always the problem. I spoke about it a lot with you. I said it a lot on the review. I've written a lot about it in the blogs. That I thought the summer was good, but Beale was always going to be judged by the big money signings. These are the two big money signings. And obviously Danilo falls into that bracket. He's been discussed. But these boys, for £8 million, they had to be right. And immediately you have big doubts. And the issue isn't, can they turn it around? Nobody's saying that anymore. The issue is, and people are now saying, instead of that, they're saying, how quickly can we get rid of these guys? And that's not sustainable for them. And once this crowd makes up their mind, lads, that's it.
No, I agree with you, Stevie. I've just got a vibe whenever I watch and I feel like at the stadium, or if I'm watching it at home or whatever, whenever Lammers gets a touch, and there's like, you didn't get that excitement. For best or worse, you can say what you want about Ryan Kent. There was always that moment like Kent could maybe do something, you know what I mean? That got people a little bit excited. There's a frustration nearly every single time Lammers touches it. And when you look at his stats so far this year, he's played 19 games. in all competitions. He has 1 goal and 1 assist, and he's playing a large majority of the minutes, Stevie. That's what's the biggest worry. It's the fact he's staying on and doing that fair. If you look at Danilo, he's barely played, but he's got a good goal to game ratio, or goal to minute ratio, I should say. But looking at Lammers, it's just frustration. Like you said, you can see some stuff with Dessers. I don't know if he's the most unluckiest human that's ever been, Stevie. Like the way things seems to bounce off him, no go in, bounce off him, end up being a penalty against him. I don't know if he's unlucky or if that's just who he is, because obviously he's shown in his past he can be a really good forward. But I watch Lammers and I just didn't see what he is. I don't know if he's a centre mid, because he seems to float about the middle a lot. I don't know if he's an attacker. He doesn't ever seem to drive towards the box whenever he gets the touch, and he's certainly not a winger, because Tavernier's out there on the right hand side completely on his own. So it's just watching that, you can feel the frustration. We've all got the frustration, and that's why every single home game there is that vibe every time we see him. So I agree with what David said a couple of minutes ago there. He was shocked and surprised. I was surprised Lammers go by 25 minutes, if I'm honest. That was when Hearts made that early sub. I thought that we were going to be making a change, because we looked like a man down, arguably 2 men down for a large majority of that game.
Yeah, I would say, just quickly before bring David in on it, on that point, CJ, there's a thing that kind of frustrates me with Sam Lammers. I don't know how you boys feel about this. He seems to do good things.
Yeah,
and then he's still 40 yards from goal.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me. And then when he does get towards the goal, it's almost like he doubts himself, and he'll check back, or he'll try and do something safe. And he's never really, like, Todd Cantwell yesterday was trying to make things happen. Now, did he have a great game? I'm not so sure he had a wonderful game.
No.
But he was actively trying to affect the play. Now, he was forcing it. Sometimes he ran into trouble. He won the penalty. But he was actively getting involved in the bits that really matter. Can you honestly say that Sam Lammers is affecting the game the way he should? And that's a big thing for me, David. He seems to be doing things 40 yards from goal, not where we really need it. And the wee things that he's doing isn't really, does that make sense?
Yeah, there's form and there's confidence, right? And he currently has neither. And unfortunately, as you lose out on form, your confidence lowers, and it's a vicious circle. And I think we're seeing that with Sam Lammers, but he isn't doing enough to justify being in the side. That's the issue, because, as you say, that there's not even the odd moment here or there. You could maybe point to the shot. It was a good save from the goalkeeper in Prague, but bar that, in 2 matches, he just hasn't had much of an effect on the games. He's a strange footballer, because he has touch. You can see he can control a ball, but it just doesn't seem to ever really lead to anything. He can go by a man, but he doesn't seem to get away from the man, if that makes sense. Like, he'll beat the man, but he won't get away. Maybe it's that lack of pace, that we burst that Cantwell has, just to carry him away from a player. And I think that when McCausland came on, a couple of passes just right through the, direct passes that could have put someone in. And it is just about, there's a great phrase, I'm going to go like an old story here. Famously, Sir Alex Ferguson, he dropped Jim Leighton for the 1990 FA Cup final replay after he had a howler. And he was asked about it later, and they said, well, you picked Les Sealey, your veteran number 2. He said, well, it's not because Les is a better goalie than Jim, he's not, but right now he thinks he is. And he was just talking about he'll go in confident and do what I need him to do, whereas Leighton, who was completely shot, couldn't. And I'm kind of like that with Lammers. I'm not sure how you get it back, by the way, because we've tried playing him through it, and it hasn't really happened at all. And I also think there's a point where the fans make their mind up, and they really have. But also what can become difficult is if you become an emblem of a bad summer. These two are very much, I think, become the representatives. So when people think about Beale and the mess that he made in the summer, these are the two that come to mind immediately. And Stevie, you said in the summer, and you're spot on, he won't get praise, Beale, for the likes of Butland, because it's how you spend the money. We don't have much money, and how you spend it is important. These were 2 of the big signings, and right now we're not getting anything for the investment. You've got to take them out the firing line, and also for the sake of the team. you've got to take them out the firing line. The fact that Dessers only lasted half a game yesterday tells you everything. We're going to Dundee midweek, and would I play Danilo and McCausland in place of two of them? 100%.
Can I just say one last thing as well, just about Sam Lammers, because it's not just a Rangers thing, because there's been a lot of people that's came here maybe struggled and not adapted to the league or maybe been slow starters. That's kind of been where his career's been for the last 3-4 years, if you look at it. I mean, there was a period where 4 seasons where he scored 9 goals. That's not a surprise. It's no a shock. This is unfortunately who he's been after bursting onto the scene, coming out the traps, flying high, getting a big money move. This has been who he is for the last 4 years. So that's why I think there is justified frustration, because it's been there. We've seen it. This isn't a shock. He's not in a bad spell. It's been like this for the last 3-4 years, and that's what the real worry is, because we haven't seen any light to it. Any of the 3 previous clubs that took a gamble on him has saw it, and that's what's worrying for me.
Yeah, I think that's sorry, David. I was just going to say that's spot on, and that was a big highlight. Everybody said it. And I remember saying it about Dessers, but I also said, to caveat that, it would be unfair not to say that, I said you have to trust the manager. The manager will live and die by these signings. And the manager did indeed live and die by these signings. And now, unfortunately for Clement, he needs to try and get something out of them. But he'll know himself. There's no way he's standing there at the sidelines and being so... I'm not going to say aggressive, David, but he's definitely different in how he approaches things. Demanding, right? He's more demanding. I think that's fair of what he expects from this team. There's no way he's standing on that sideline thinking that these boys are good enough for the club.
No, and it reminds me a wee bit of Brandon Barker. Did you see the thing a couple of weeks ago? Trent Alexander-Arnold was asking
yes, this is
best opponent. Yeah, and he said Brandon Barker told him absolutely. He says that boy's going to be the best player in the world when he was at Man City. Every coach that's worked with Brandon Barker, City, Rangers, Hibs, anywhere, says you should see this boy in training, but they just cannot get it unlocked. No coach has been able to unlock it on the pitch for whatever reason. You know, obviously the ability is there, but for some reason it never translates onto part. And I just every time I watch Lammers, that's exactly the thought that's going through my head. That clearly, as Stevie said, look at the clubs he's been at. Clearly, people see ability there, right? But they just can't convert it onto the park, which unfortunately is no use to anybody. And CJ, I think it's a really good point. We'll move on to a couple of positives then. There weren't many yesterday. Because, as we say, even the guys that played okay, Lundstrom was one, they were still making mistakes. You know, it wasn't nobody, with the exception of the goalkeeper. Oh, thank God for the goalkeeper. Nobody with the exception of Jack was error-free. I thought, for example, in the first half, both fullbacks struggled. That's really the first physically I've seen Yilmaz bullied. But I also thought I thought Shankland ripped him apart in the first half yesterday. The midfield, you know, Raskin and Lundstrom were putting passes, giving the ball away unnecessarily, and then the front line just didn't function. But we did keep at it, and we did keep going. So there was a positivity there. But also, when Danilo came on, now you could see he's working his way back to fitness. You could see that, you know, he's not quite there yet. But a wee bit like Shankland, because I think Shankland deserves praise for this. It's not just height, by the way, that does Yilmaz on that opening goal. If you watch both the goals are quite similar in a way, that it's that movement that goal scorers have. And there is a difference between a goal scorer and a forward. Watch both of them with a defender. They move forward, which takes the defender under the ball, but then they quickly move back. It's really intelligent, and it's all done in a split second, but it's just a couple of steps inside, the defender goes with him, and then you pull off him, the defender's under the ball, you're there for the header. Both of them did that, and both of them deserve real credit. It was excellent play. Danilo's movement, CJ, just you instantly saw the difference where he was taking the Hearts defenders into places they didn't really want to go. And on top of that, although it didn't quite work out, he was involved in linking up a lot of play through the centre of the box. Now, yeah, that didn't work out in terms of a goal directly. But what that does is it gets the defenders turning and creates a bit of confusion and creates a bit of danger in their mind. You've got to pile that on when you're facing basically a siege defence. He does look a player whenever we've seen him this season, and he just looks, I just think, more natural a goal scorer.
Yeah, you can tell that he really wants a goal as well. Like even Sparta, when he came on, I thought he changed the game as well. I know he had a very brief appearance there, but hitting the bar with a shot, forcing it, running in behind, it's instant, especially when you're watching, again, not a hard point again, but the Lammers and Dessers. I feel like sometimes where they are, they're no sniffing out the chances, they're no diving at the front post, they're no breaking their neck to go ahead and do this. We've already seen it, not even being funny that he has put his face where it hurts to score a goal. You know what I mean? He is a goal scorer, that's what he wants today for his club. And I thought just him coming on set the crowd in the right way, because we know we've got a goal scorer there. We can see his movement, we can see his trying, he's saying, we can see his goat Sutton about him again to drag these defenders in. You're absolutely spot on. That's why I was kind of a wee bit of a Cholak fanboy at the three of us, because I liked his movement in and around the box, and I think we've been starved of that. And unfortunately, again, with his injury, it's kind of starved us of that as well. But it's good to see him starting now, or coming into the game, and I'm hoping to see him starting very, very soon. It's just how fit actually is he? Because if we can get him 100% fit, I think he'll be a massive asset for this football club, because you can see it, David, just like you're saying there, he can sniff at the goals. His movement's spectacular. It's that little fake inside that creates the gap, that gets the ball over the defender. If that's just somebody standing next to him, the defender's clearing that all day. But it's the movement that does the defender, and not one other person besides obviously yourself a couple of minutes ago has actually mentioned it. Sensational centre forward play.
Yeah, and like I say, fair play to Shankland, who
he's good as well. Yeah,
he did exactly that as well, and it is just guys that end up, Stevie, at the end of the season with good figures. It's because we go back. I'm not comparing an ability, but Boyd, McCoy, etc. It's just I'm not sure you can teach it. I think you can instruct them, but I think a lot of it's instinctive, where it's just, oh, there's Tav, he's got the ball, so what I'll do is I'll just, because it all happens so quickly, it's just a second, it's just I'll move him in and there we go. And it was brilliant play, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually said, I think I spoke to you after on the way home, might have been, I said the boy had got caught under it, but it wasn't until I watched it earlier that I saw exactly what you're talking about, and it's that movement takes him in, just like you said, and it's enough for him then to be in an area where he doesn't want to be, he's under the ball, and as soon as Tav hits it, there was that wee noise from the crowd that thinks, oh, that's got a chance, and then that movement does him completely. And not only does the movement is good, the header's actually brilliant.
Yeah,
downward true. Into the corner,
unsavable.
It is unsavable. From that range, a lot of people maybe wouldn't have been brave enough, would have just tried to get it on target and anything, but he's actually directed it perfectly in. And there's evidence to suggest, as we said before, there's evidence to suggest that this boy can take chances. And yeah, he's missed a couple, but I don't mind strikers missing. That's it. If they're going to be in there to do it, then I don't mind that happening, because the evidence suggests that he will take the bigger chances. So yeah, I'm with you, boys. I have quietly pinned my hopes on this boy being the one that at the moment can kind of fire us a goal, because we need something. I'm with you boys as well, that there comes to a point where it was asked of me yesterday, actually, what point do you say about Dessers and Lammers, the experiment just isn't working, we need to change it? I think we're there now. As CJ says, 19 games for Lammers. Dessers has had a run as a number 9. I don't have his sort of statistic to hand, but, this isn't something that's going to fix itself. If we go to Dundee on Wednesday night and they boys do well and perform, the crowd aren't going to suddenly change their mind and say, right, these boys are great after all. Like you said earlier, David, I think it is time to change it up. And the thing with bringing in somebody like Ross McCausland is the crowd will go with them naturally.
Crowd will help, yes, 100%. Yes,
absolutely.
Then it changes the dynamic of what you're seeing. And then, perhaps when Cantwell is trying to force stuff, and when Tav is playing the ball into the box, and these other wee things that we are doing, perhaps if we're managing to change it up and there's more of a threat in there, then, as you said earlier about the whole Leighton thing, Ross McCausland's going to come in there thinking, well, I should be playing.
Yeah.
I should, I've got this ability. So, throw them in, and see where it takes us. And I'm saying throwing them in, and that's a wee bit unfair. I think he's earned his chance because of the cameos that he's done well in. So give him an opportunity. Let's see if he can do something. Ross McCausland isn't a young boy anymore. He's 20. So let's see if he's got the ability. I believe he does have something about him. We're going to have to spend big on wingers. That's, he wants to play with wingers. We've only really got Rabbi Matondo. I think that Sima, and Danilo up front might be quite interesting at some point, but he's having to play left side and he's doing a great job. There's no criticism there, but I think he might be more potent or, more effectual perhaps in a striking role. I think both of them together might be interesting. But we're going to need to spend on wingers. So the point being is, why don't we see if McCausland will save us a few balls and see if he can be a squad player? So I'm with you boys. Change it up a wee bit. And he's given them an opportunity. There's been 3 games now. We haven't seen enough. So let's see perhaps if others can do it, especially in Dundee on Wednesday night. It's not going to be an easy game. Can we afford, the crowd to be kind of not on their backs, but can we afford for them to be wondering what we're going to get every time they get the ball? Because there's no... Did you feel it yesterday, David? There's no hype when they get the ball. There's
there's worry. There's concern.
Stress. There's stress, yeah.
There's stress, and there's no patience either. And whenever they do anything wrong, you hear it from the crowd. That's what I mean about you can be too far gone. And I do already think both of them are. And people who listen to these shows know that I'm generally very slow to kind of turn on a player. But I just don't think it's helped. I don't think it's helping them either, by the way, being out there, because I said to you yesterday, Stevie, that they're dying on the vine out there. You can see it.
See, when you... Sorry, David. I was just going to say, just to answer Stevie's question, Dessers has 4 and 18. See if you combine them both. They've scored 5 goals between them in 37 matches this season.
Yeah,
that's nowhere near good enough. That's see, when you just hear that and you see it and you let that register how many minutes they're playing as well. Like, that's horrifying to actually see. And
you have to, for the sake of the team, you have to change it round. Now, before I ask you about this, lads, I think it's important to declare my bias, right? Because we're not neutral here. We're all Rangers fans. But also, in the case of the Hearts manager, Stephen Naismith, I don't like him. Okay?
Yep.
And I think I don't need to explain why. Some of you will think that's harsh. A lot of you will agree with me. So when he came in yesterday into the press conference, very upset, you could see that, understandably so. But he then said that it was never a penalty because he'd watched it back. I hadn't seen it at that time. I don't think anyone in the room had. But he said it's not a penalty. He saw it back, and Rangers were blocking at every set piece. And in this one, John Lundstrom, he singled out. He said John Lundstrom blocks their defender. So even though there is a pull, it shouldn't have been a penalty because it should have been a free kick to Hearts. He then said, he asked the referee, John Beaton, and Beaton said, I'm not showing a build-up, I'm just showing the incident, and I've to make my mind up from that. So, did he have a point? I went away, and look, I think I'm okay at saying we got away with one there, right? I think I'll hold my hands up to it afterwards. Maybe not at the time, but I went back and watched it, and I cannot for the life of me see what he's talking about. I really can't. And I've tried, a few angles, still struggling to see it. I'll start with you, Stevie. You're a qualified referee. Does he have a point, or was it simply a couple of minutes after a painful defeat, sour grapes?
Now retired referee, David. So
of course, yes.
Which CJ will testify is a good thing for everyone. But no, listen, I would like to think I'm quite honest when it comes to these things as well. John Beaton had a good game yesterday. He didn't see that, and I absolutely understand why he didn't see it, because he would have not only been watching the corner being taken, but he's got so much to keep his eye on that he's maybe not seen it. You don't see it. And no criticism of the referee there. That's what VAR's there for. Is it soft? Absolutely, it is. I agree it's soft. But if you pull somebody's jersey and then you keep hold of it and they fall over, you can argue all you want about why should he fall over and why should he do this, but he's quite entitled to play for that penalty and fall over when he feels that happening. So, it's Hearts' own stupidity. There was no foul there. Blocking does go on. Lundstrom's not impeded him. He's still got his hand on his jersey as Lundstrom kind of as they come together. And even then, before Lundstrom comes into the picture, he's still pulling him anyway.
Mm.
So, and people say that this happens all the time, and it does happen all the time, but the difference in the law is clear. Could Connor Goldson have got that ball? The answer is yes. Very much like Rodri at Old Trafford.
I was going to ask about that.
So that is something you see 100 times in the penalty area. And the difference is, the argument is Rodri's on the end of that. And that's why it then becomes a foul. Now, people get pulled and shoved and grabbed all the time, right? And people will then say, well, look, that happens 100 times a game. You'll end up with 100 penalties. That's not the law. That's not where it's allowed. It's same as blocking. You can do that to an extent. It happens all the time. It's part of the game. But if you're going to affect the play, which is a big thing, David, if you're going to affect the play, then, and there was similar. Let's look at another one yesterday in the Old Trafford again. Haaland. Did you see the one where Haaland got basically manhandled to the ground?
Yes,
yeah.
that should have been.
Yeah, arguably it should have been. But the argument then on the other side is he's not getting on any of that ball.
Yeah.
So that's the difference of those decisions. That's the two penalties yesterday. I'm not saying it's right. There's an argument there, but that's how the officials look at it. So was Connor Goldson going to get on the end of that? Arguably, yes. Was Rodri going to get on the end of it? Arguably, yes. And that's why the penalty kick's given. It was delightful tears of pain from Stephen Naismith. If I could have been Cartman on that wee where you go up and lick his face and say, unfathomable joy of salty tears, then I would have been. Now, I'm not quite Cartman shape as such.
Oh, that's when you need to dress like it's Halloween, mate. Get the Halloween outfit.
With Stephen Naismith's face next to me doing that. But yeah, listen, David, there was I agree with you. I don't like him either. Obvious reasons why. But also, see, last time he was in Ibrox, he behaved quite poorly as well in the tunnel and everything else in the 2-2 game. So I enjoyed every minute of his big sour face coming in yesterday. So it would be childish to say get it up him. But I'm bigger than that, so I won't say it. But if you all listen to say it, that's absolutely fine.
CJ, you play a lot more than Stevie and I do these days. Mm-hmm. Blocking, it does go on. I thought it was a tactic. Yeah. Hearts were doing it. And there is a difference between blocking and actually taking a man out. Blocking is
you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that, obviously. But you are allowed to go and stand where the guy wants to run. You don't need to give him a clear run at the ball.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like protecting your own man. Like mostly the blocking happens when you've got someone else beside you and then you're just trying to get them so they've got a free run towards the ball to be able to attack. As long as you're not pulling or anything like that. Like, I'm not exactly the biggest human, so I'm not really the biggest target for set pieces, if I'm honest. I'm usually told to go and stand next to the goalie, but I've obviously seen a lot of it, and it's every level, no matter what you're playing at. Stevie will test to this day, there's always a block there because you want your biggest aerial threat to have a wee bit more room because that's going to be the guy that's getting pulled or getting pulled back. So you just stand next to him, try and shield him on, and that's exactly what Rangers did. There's never a foul there, and I just think it's funny that they're just ignoring the clear indication of the shot nearly getting swapped. It was like at the end of a game when you change your shot. No one wants to talk about that. They want to talk about a block that happens in every single set piece ever. The amount of goals we've conceded over the years with the Aberdeen's blocking and everything like that. Like even the Katic penalty from a few years ago, and people are looking at that with the shot pull. It's all been the exact same. So I just find it very ironic that it's now a problem when we get a correct decision.
Yeah, when we do. Yeah. But the other thing about it is I watched Stevie's right. I watched the Manchester City game. Manchester City same. They do it brilliantly. They don't foul.
They do it better than anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Like most things. But they knew United were trying to get the ball to Maguire at set pieces, so he never had a clear run at the ball because you don't want a guy who's brilliant in the air running 10 yards. One of our problems. I mean, how many goals last season did we concede? Because the big guy got clear runs at the delivery. So we get the points and we move on. Now, just to move away, obviously with Dundee midweek, but that's the manager's first competitive week. 3 games. Hibs, Prague, Hearts. Initial thoughts, because he's only been here a couple of weeks. We've heard from him a few times. I think he has been quite good at getting his philosophy across, Stevie. But it's too early to tell one way or the other. But I think so far he's done pretty much all he could have done.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, we can't sit here and say he's going to be wonderful, he's going to be a success. The jury, we're all, I think, a bit more guarded this time round because of not Clement's fault, but because of what's happened to us in the last couple of years. And I think that's totally understandable. But in terms of what he could have achieved in this week with the squad he has, the players he has available, the injury situation, as CJ touched on slightly, he's clearly got an issue with the fitness levels of this team. He's mentioned it. I think yesterday was the only time he hasn't mentioned in a press conference about the fitness of these players. So
no, I was reading it back. There was one wee reference. There was.
Well, was it? So, well, fair enough. He's mentioned it then more or less every time, and I think that speaks volumes of where or his levels of standards are and where he wants to get us to. So I think all in all, he's come through the last week with flying colours. But the good thing about it, David, is that sometimes when a new manager comes in, you get this bounce where everything goes swimmingly, and you see he's maybe standing at the touchline saying, "Well, I don't see where all the issues are." Clement's literally seen the good, the bad, and the very ugly. Prague during the week was 65 minutes of torture, more or less, and he still managed to get 20 good minutes out of them. So he's seen that, and then he's seen yesterday up close. Now, Hibs was a bit of a freak in that they came and were wide open, and that's when we're at our best. So that didn't really teach him much, but he would learn more from the last 2 games, I think, than he did in that one. But in terms of Clement in the first week, he's done everything necessary. Funnily enough, Dundee away will be a tricky game because they've got a result at the weekend and they'll kind of be flying high. And, that wee bunch, I think there's 2 or 3 points between kind of last and, or sorry, not last, but 11th and 4th. So they'll feel like they can kind of push on and it'll be a tricky game for us. So he'll keep learning. But in terms of first week, David, and what he's done and what he has to work with, then I think he's done wonderfully well.
CJ?
Yeah, kind of like Stevie, and I'm like yourself, we've all kind of spoke about it when it happened. We're not exactly going to get too over it this like all exciting about it. We're kind of guarded, you know what I mean? Our heart's been broken a couple of times. We're just taking it nice and slow. But I'd actually argue the tactical adjustments he made at half time versus Sparta is something that's kind of gave me a wee bit more a boost, maybe even more so than the 4-0 versus Hibs. Obviously great, we love to see it, and the win versus Hearts was obviously great, but he's seen a lot of the ugly side of the game. But we were getting absolutely hounded and ripped apart in that first 45 minutes versus Sparta. We could have been 4 or 5 down. The changes they made, despite again limited squad with injuries, no left back having to play a formation they didn't know, the adjustments that he made at halftime for us to go and make several chances in that second half to win it shows he's definitely got something about him. It's just going to take a bit of time. I feel like we've got a right manager in. He knows what he's doing. We just need to give him time to get there, and I think he will get there in my time.
Well,
I certainly hope so.
Yes, fingers crossed. Right then, that will do us for this afternoon. It was great to get you both back, lads. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Stevie, big interview coming up, I hear.
Ooh. Yeah, as you boys know, I kept this one fairly quiet because sometimes, things get cancelled or whatever, but delighted this morning to record an interview with Richard Gough. 40 minutes, David, and I had a whole list of things to ask him about 9 in a row, about his time there, and then some in the present day stuff, and we barely scratched the surface. In truth, a guy that's won 18 honours and captained the club in the Hall of Fame, you would need 5 hours just to get somewhere. But we got 40 minutes, and it's a brilliant listen, and he just tells us all about Walter, all about Graham Souness, all about Gascoigne, Laudrup, and, some silly stuff flung in, favourite goals, favourite moments of the club, who was the best dressed, worst dressed, that kind of stuff. And it's all quite good. So you'll be able to find that on the Four Lads website, and you can also find it on Four Lads podcast, which you can find on all of the podcast providers. David, we're on Spotify and Apple, all them sort of things. Just simply type in Four Lads Bite Size Podcast, and we do a wee after game stuff, as you know, myself and Sarah on match days and stuff like that. So it's just started. It's supposed to be on alternative, because we do the longer stuff here on Heart and Hand, but this is just 15-20 minutes. So albeit Richard Goff's interview is a feature interview, it's 40 minutes. But normally
it would have been a bit offside to get the great Richard Goff
and then do 10 minutes.
10 minutes, mate. Aye,
absolutely. But hopefully people will find that. So obviously, Four Lads Had a Dream on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, and you can find it on all the podcast websites just by typing in Four Lads Bite Size Podcast. So hopefully people enjoy it. I think it's brilliant. It's my era. I absolutely love that team, and I thought Goff was brilliant. He really gave us a great insight into what that was like. And as I said, Leeds, Marseille, Haitley, McCoy's, Gaza, everything, David, it's all in there. So hopefully people enjoy it when it comes out.
CJ, you can always find at his channel, CJ, which is doing very well for itself.
That is me. I've not really got anything quite as cool going on, if I'm honest with you, but I'll be there talking with Dundee very shortly, hopefully smiling from ear to ear, celebrating another win in a couple of days. That'd be nice.
Well, I wanted to tell you this because my nephew, who is 10, I was seeing him the other day, and my sister says, "Oh, he started listening to your podcast." I said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Do you enjoy it?" He said, "Aye, it's nearly as good as CJ Novo's." No, fucking, like, he wasn't taking the piss. He wasn't. It wasn't done to be cheeky. He just genuinely meant it as a compliment. So there you go, mate. This is the thing.
Shout him out. What a lad.
I've told you, guys, I've told you before, my old man's 70, and he sits at home and kind of watches the Ranger stuff and all that. And I'll say, "Did you watch the review, or did you read the blog?" And that. He said, "No, I watched CJ. He was good." I know he texted me the other day. He says, "Oh, CJ, I've seen him. He's doing them in his car these days. They're still brilliant, though." I'm like, "Aye, brilliant, Dad. Thanks." I'll let him know. So, David, we're trailing in the family stakes with it, aren't we? So, what do you do about that?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. I just because, like I say, when I say it, it sounds like he was just being cheeky. He wasn't. He genuinely meant it as a compliment. So, quite frankly, the stage I am in life, I'll take any compliments I can get. So, I took it with good grace. Right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, here on Heartland, I'll be back later in the week and available all the time on our Patreon. So, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll speak to you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.